Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sirhan on X, coming to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 19th of June of the calendar year 2025. Sorry, my little camera's a little out of whack this evening. Apologize for the technical difficulties that took place last night. As we all know, here in Cincinnati, after 7 o'clock, a bombarded storm just took place. And there's actually someone over at the Reds game nailed a picture of a lightning bolt. I mean, it was like very, very surreal to actually someone take a picture of it. So here we are back at it. Hopefully, everyone was able to survive that last night because it was a crazy hour and a half with heavy winds, gusts, rain, and storms. Hopefully, nobody got hurt and everyone is safe amidst all of those conditions last night. And here we are on the 19th of June. We're getting ready to get this thing started. I hope everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. Just want to touch on several things here real quick before I get into the big stuff at the end. Of course, the big news that took place in the NFL was, of course, Jaire Alexander to the Baltimore Ravens. I told everyone this was going to happen. The rumors were been out there for the longest time. Everyone points to his connection with the standout Lamar Jackson in Baltimore as the connection for it. Lamar Jackson told the general manager, Eric DaCosta, to go get him, and he got it. Understandably so, there's a lot of celebration in Baltimore, but I think a lot of them know there's also expectations that come with it. We're going to see where that gets him. He's as good as anyone can be in that position, at the cornerback position. As we all know, there were phases over last season where that cornerback was just absolutely just lit up when it came to giving up big plays, especially when we talk about the two-game series against Cincinnati, where basically all kinds of pass records were set both ways, all kinds of yard records, all kinds of points. But even then, even after that, Baltimore still had deficiency last year of giving up big plays, especially when we consider how Brandon Stevens, who 2 years before rose up, but last year, look like he fell off a map because he was the one that's giving up the big plays. He was let go as a free agent. They brought in, of course, Chidobe Awuzie. They did draft Nate Wiggins and TJ Tampa last season. Now you add Jaire Alexander that much. Again, he's as good as anyone can be, but the question is, how reliable is he? Because he hasn't played I can remember the last time he's played a full season, but he can be as good as anyone when he wants to be. The keywords being as he wants to be. Maybe a fresh start in Baltimore with his longtime friend Lamar Jackson over there might be what the doctor ordered for him. We'll see where this one goes because everyone in the AFC North is already making their nitpick reactions to what took place with this. Again, I don't know where this is going to get them. I think they know what happens in the regular season doesn't matter. It now matters what they have to do in the postseason, especially their head coach, John Harbaugh, who's had the great teams to get the job done, but for some reason, he just can't. The biggest one, of course, was 2 years ago when they had the home field advantage, lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC title game. But this year, we look at the moves they made from the draft to the free agency. You probably see there's no excuses over there simply because they got what they wanted. They wanted a team. They had everything in front of them before the season started last season. I mean, of course, they managed to get to the divisional round, lose to Buffalo. But now you got to get the job done. There's no way out of it. I mean, will it be a catastrophic failure? If you don't, maybe. But now you have the personnel to put together a pretty darn good defense, especially but you can't be any worse than last year per Baltimore standards because they were giving up big plays all over the place on that side of the ball. But this was, I thought, a solid move. No one's going to mistake Jaire Alexander for being the reincarnation of a prime Deion Sanders, but it's good enough, adds to the cornerback room they needed. Again, he's good when he wants to be. The key words, obviously, are as when he wants to be. So good luck with that one, Baltimore. I think you guys will be just fine. You're still the favorites to win the AFC North. You'll probably win that division. After that, who knows? You could make it. You have the talent, obviously. But, of course, there's that team in Kansas City who's going to have something to say about that when the time comes because we know they're itching to get back there again. And as long as they have this foundation they have, they're always going to be a problem in the AFC. I mean, I don't even know who's the real favorite at this point. I mean, but Baltimore has to be among the favorites. They're the favorites to win the division at least, and that's what I expect them to accomplish at the end of the season. That's pretty much it. I mean, Pittsburgh might be their only challenge, but they're like a distant second compared to what Baltimore has. That's pretty much it. But a solid acquisition. You knew it was coming because they needed depth in that secondary. They got it. Good move by the Baltimore Ravens. And after that, we're going to go to Kansas City, as I talked about, because of the real solid news here out of this coming, especially touching here in the state of Ohio. The standout left tackle Josh Simmons out of Ohio State looks like he's going to be ready for training camp. You want to talk about falling into the perfect situation? How would you like to be Josh Simmons falling to the team that went to 3 straight Super Bowls, and basically you can have the obligation to protect the blind side of probably the greatest quarterback of this generation right now, because that's what you get. And what a way for it to fall on your lap, and what a way for this thing to get going, because I think it's going to be a great fit over there, especially if he's healthy, because we know that the left tackle position over there in Kansas City was almost like a musical left tackles, pick one, and we know it turned out to be a turnstile, especially when they made the move to put Joe Thuney there in the playoffs. But of course, it caught up to them in the Super Bowl when he just got mugged by Josh Sweat, who basically just torched him in that Super Bowl game. But I said when it came to Josh Simmons, when he was in the draft prospects, I said the guy, if he was healthy, had it not been for the ACL tear he had in Ohio State, or the Achilles or whatever injury he had, he would have not made it out of the top 10. He had that kind of a talent. He was a franchise-type left tackle. And for him to fall down to the 31st pick to the Kansas City Chiefs, that tells you basically luck was in his lap, because that's what happened at the end of the day. Then they expect him to be ready for camp. Of course, also Rashee Rice. We know the off-field controversy with that one, but not even worth talking about because, he's got a football game to play. I mean, everyone's going to be outraged simply because of his off-the-field antics, especially when we talk about fans in Buffalo and Cincinnati who like to make big deal out of nothing all the time. But they're going to be there, and I think Kansas might be better this year on offense than last year. Of course, it's going to come down to how they utilize their assets, because Patrick Mahomes is going to have some assets this year, especially if Rashee Rice can come back from the injury he had last season. They're still going to be, at least betting-wise, the favorites to come out of the AFC at least, because they've been there, favorites of last 7 years? They'll probably be the favorites again, and it's going to take a lot for someone to knock them off. I mean, as well as Buffalo and Baltimore played respectively over the last 2 seasons, they couldn't get the job done. That should tell you just how good this Kansas City team has been since they lost a 2021 AFC title game to Cincinnati, where basically it was a giveaway. It wasn't the Cincinnati winning. The Chiefs just handed the game to them on a silver platter. But other than that, the run still goes 3 titles in the last 6 seasons, and they're going to probably be a favorite to come out of the AFC at the very least. But Josh Simmons gives them stability at the left tackle position, which is something they haven't had all last season. And if he's 100% fully recovered from what happened to him in Ohio State, excellent grab. Still need to be said. And now we're going to go up to northeastern Ohio, and somebody has some growing up to do. Apparently, Shauders Sanders decided to go 101 miles per hour on one of the roads up there in the Northeast. Here's the thing. I'll just try to say this respectfully because I don't take up immaturity or whatever. You're going that fast, especially when you give a chance to play in the NFL. You might as well just hit the pause button on yourself, because not only that, I also heard that he didn't even show up to a court date. I mean, apparently he had some court date he didn't even show up to, not with this one, but another situation. But as I divulge into this a little bit, I mean, I don't want to. I mean, the guy's a kid. We know the name from his famous father, the standout Deion Sanders. We know the draft pick of him was publicized. Anything that's going to happen to him will be publicized, given the family background of his. But even then, why are you going 101 miles per hour on a road? That doesn't make any sense unless you're out on a track challenging for NASCAR or something. I mean, they were actually raving about him earlier, which I don't know how true that is, because we know how the Cleveland media works. But that is what we're stuck at here with the situation. I mean, I want to tell the kid he needs to start to mature a little bit, but he's what, 22 or 23? I mean, we all make mistakes as a young adult. Yours truly being one of them. I don't exempt myself, but why would what I don't get is why would you resort to something like this? That's what I don't understand. I mean, you got drafted. I think it was 144th overall. I mean, you got drafted, and you got the opportunity to play in the NFL. You guys need to start growing up a little bit. I mean, we're already dealing with one here in Cincinnati with Shamar Stewart and his contractual holdout situation, calling out the front office when he doesn't have a leg to stand on. And there's a few others out there, I'm sure. Also, when you get a chance to be drafted to play in the National Football League, you better step up and do something and actually grow up because the opportunity is there for you. You don't want to blow it. Actually, for you guys in Cincinnati, you guys can Google an individual named Odell Thurman, who basically was another one of those who basically had the opportunity but blew it. That should tell you everything about opportunity and privilege in the NFL. And that's what I have to say about the Shauders Sanders situation. Weird. I mean, if someone told me I could play in the NFL, I would grow up in a heartbeat because the opportunity is there. Lay low. You have a career to pursue. Go get it. Now to the NBA. And it was announced today that the Genie Bus, the last member of the Bus family, sold, I believe, a significant share to an individual out of called the TWA Global Group for I believe it was pull this figure up, $10 billion to an individual, if I can pronounce his name correctly. I'm Googling this as we speak. His name is Mark Walter. We know for the longest time, actually from my time, especially when we talk about the Showtime Lakers, it was the premier franchise in all of sports, not just the NBA, all of team sports. You have the money and you buy the Los Angeles Lakers back then, you were going to hit the lottery. That's what it was. Nobody had it like the Los Angeles Lakers, especially when we consider the situation with back then Dr. Jerry Buss and of course head coach Pat Riley, the Smiler Magic Johnson. You know they always had it. Genie Bus selling this to this individual here named Mark Walter. Okay. They're not the franchise you once knew. They're not your mom and pop's Los Angeles Lakers. I get it. But even then, someone had the money to get it. Might as well give them credit for it. Simply because that's what has come out of all of this. So nothing more to add to that. You're talking about probably one of the richest franchises in the NBA, maybe all of team sports still. But that's where we got when it comes to the NBA in this particular situation. What does it mean in the long term for guys like LeBron James and Luka Doncic? Nobody knows. Because we know LeBron James just entered into the final year of a contract. And we know how they got the Luka Doncic trade. We don't know what's going to happen for the future. I know Genie Bus is still a part of that particular team in terms of ownership share. I think it's 15%, largely due because Bus has, per NBA rules, has to have some kind of ownership stake in it, especially when she has a role of some kind of governor. So that's the dilemma of that particular situation. They always find a way to make their way in the news, even though the franchise is irrelevant. We're talking the Los Angeles Lakers. That's how they are. Now we're going to go trace back to probably the wildest summer of my lifetime. This was the summer of 1994. NBA Finals and the OJ Simpson chase that took place simultaneously all across NBC, which we know NBC was the flagship station for the NBA Finals and where the longest time OJ Simpson was working for NBC Sports. You guys don't know back then, he did some broadcasting work for NBC after his playing days. You know the story with this one, the White Bronco being televised all across the nation in the middle of the NBA Finals. Because the whole thing, basically there's a ESPN 30 for 30 documentary on it that had everything taking place. We all know this, and it's probably the most surreal thing I've ever seen. because I was glued into watching the NBA Finals that day because it was a 2-2 even series where basically it was a pivotal Game 5 at Madison Square Garden. Basically, the Garden was still buzzing because just recently before that, the New York Rangers won the Stanley Cup on a Mark Messier guarantee before Game 7, and New York was on a buzz. In the middle of all that, you had the split screens of Game 5 of the NBA Finals and the situation with OJ Simpson, where we know that whole thing with the Bronco chase was just a nationwide hit. And it was all across the airwaves, especially with in the middle of the finals, doing split screens, side-by-side screens, almost like diagonal screens, every which way you want to do it. For it to happen that simultaneously the way it did was absolutely surreal. I mean, the OJ thing, we know what happened in the end. I mean, everyone's going to have their opinion. I won't use my platform for it. I already said my piece on it once. But just that particular summer of 1994 speaks volumes as to what that summer was. It was just the most crazy thing, maybe in the history of all kinds of sports television, to have one of the premier sporting events at the time, the NBA Finals, and have the premier case, maybe ever, maybe the top significant case, maybe ever, the entire situation with OJ Simpson running simultaneously the way it did, captivated the television nation across not just the U.S., but possibly the world. Tells you how surreal what that situation was and how surreal it was when you talk about what took place in 1994. I mean, it was 31 years ago. I believe it's 31 years ago yesterday. Couldn't touch on it due to the weather climate over here. But still, when you think of the summer of 1994, having those two on, you're watching NBC simultaneously the way it was, back and forth coverage, basically interrupting coverage, trying to keep up with the finals while everyone is so fixated with the OJ case. It was just absolutely surreal. And basically, it took a life of its own, especially for those who followed sports and among many other things. Just something today, we don't see this much because now, of course, with the adventure of the internet and social media, among many other things, could you imagine if we had this in the early to mid 90s, just how the internet probably would have crashed? Because it would have. To have all of this happen on one particular summer simultaneously the way it did is something that stands on its own, in its own, like, inverted, almost perverse cultural way. Just crazy. You know what happened with the whole OJ thing, the case. Everyone's going to have their opinion. Have at it. We know what happened to him in the end. You know, karma maybe did get to him. Of course, everyone's going to make the claim of OJ Simpson could find solace that his killer is now dead, but I won't use my platform for it. But what a surreal summer of 1994. I just finished my sophomore year of high school, and I was just watching the compelling NBA Finals. Then out of nowhere, this happens, and then everything on NBC was just something of its own, and probably forever be on its own. That's all I have to say. Now to the world of boxing. And a huge shout out today to the standout Brian Norman Jr., who just clonked, pasted, and pulverized Jin Sasaki in his own backyard of Japan with the left hook in the 5th round to basically end matters. I said all along, this kid was the goods. He is the goods. I mean, everybody's talking about how the bad business was with Boots Ennis that fell through. Let me remind you, the people associated with Brian Norman Jr. aren't the easiest people to work with. And now there's speculation, of course, Boots Ennis moving up. Some say it's because of Brian Norman Jr. Now, of course, for the longest time, you know, Top Rank tried to get a Brian Norman Jr. fight with Tio Lopez, who are both under the same banner. We know Tio doesn't want the problems with Norman Jr., especially after what took place today. Brian Norman Jr. is a stud right now. I mean, maybe the next big thing in that division. I mean, everyone says Boots Ennis is. I mean, he just beat Stanionis, but now he's talking about going up to 154, talking about him and Virgil Ortiz. You know, they talked about him and Tio Lopez for the longest time. That didn't materialize, of course, because Tio doesn't want the smoke. But what Brian Norman did today to show the whole world, this guy is the goods. I mean, that's nothing more needs to be said, because Brian Norman Jr., I mean, was trending up, and everybody was asking what's going to happen next. He goes to the guy's backyard, and that's how you take care of business in a guy's backyard. You put him up, put him down, put him out, and you leave the country. That's what Brian Norman did to Jin Sasaki today. And anyone that faces him is going to have a problem because this guy is a problem in that weight class. I mean, if we talk about Rolly Romero after he beat Ryan Garcia, Norman will probably be the favorite in that one. Everybody talks about the fake welterweight champion Mario Barrios. Norman would be the favorite in that one. And he definitely beats Tio Lopez without even breaking a sweat because Tio doesn't want to fight a real opponent these days. But Brian Norman Jr., he's a goods. That's why he went over to Japan to handle business. He took care of business. That's why he's the man right now. That's why nobody wants any faults with him. I mean, shoot, they're talking about matching Brian Norman with Devin Haney. After what happened to Haney not too long ago, I don't think he wants that smoke. No one's going to want to touch Brian Norman Jr. after this because that probably sent, people to pause for a minute when that happened. Stand-up fighter, for you guys in the fight community, you want something good to talk about? You got him. His name is Brian Norman Jr. And he's going to get better. He's just getting started. And then we go to the historical perspective as I close this out. Let's start with what took place in 1932, which happens to be 92 years ago today in New York City. This was the rematch between Jack Sharkey and Max Schmeling. This was a rematch of a fight where Jack Sharkey's temperament got the better of him. He was disqualified against Schmeling the first time. And this was basically for the vacant heavyweight title, which was vacated when Gene Tunney retired. And what happened here? Basically one of the more controversial decisions maybe ever. Probably the most controversial heavyweight division in history at the time before all of the others came around. Because Max Schmeling just controlled and did anything he wanted to do to Jack Sharkey and just kept Sharkey at bay. Confused and frustrated Sharkey, who's a good boxer puncher himself, but had no answers for Schmeling. But when the decision was announced, it was Sharkey that got the split nod. One judge had it 8-7 in rounds. One judge had it 7-3 in rounds for Sharkey, but the judge who gave it to Schmeling had it 10-5. Let me remind people real quick before I proceed with this. This was the round system, not the point system, the round system. You win the round, you're given credit for the round by the judges. It was 2 judges and an official at this point. So we have this. The outcry all over the place was Max Schmeling was robbed. His manager, Joe Jacobs, stole the microphone from the ring announcer at that point, basically saying, we were robbed. I mean, the footage from what I've seen, maybe not as bad as people made it out to be back then, but Max Schmeling should have been the rightful winner. But the 2-fight series were here, and the rest of the career of Jack Sharkey, maybe his blessing and his curse was his ability to get emotional. But sometimes that curse, as it showed in the first fight with Max Schmeling, bit him. He was lucky to get the decision on this one simply because the 2 of the judges thought, I guess, he won the rounds necessarily. A few of them were close, but I don't think they were that close. From the highlights that were displayed many years back, I feel like Max Schmeling controlled the pace and he should have gotten the nod. That's how that was. Of course, this was parlayed to many bounce arounds of the heavyweight title back then because it had an interesting timeline. Because after this, Jack Sharkey fought Primo Carnera, lost his title to Carnera, and in a fight where again the temperament of Sharkey got the best of him. That was probably his downfall, was he couldn't control his emotions in the ring. Caught up to him when he lost to Carnera. Carnera would lose to Max Baer in basically at a brief title defense after he got the win over Sharkey. But we know what that spun off as. After that, Max Baer lost to the Cinderella man, James J. Braddock, where Braddock just pulled the upset of the year as a 10-1 underdog. Back then, 10-1 underdogs, you were the thing. And that's what happened when Max Baer got shocked by James J. Braddock. But it spawns off to the next topic that we're going to discuss, because it was in 1937 when, after he upset Max Baer in what was at the time the biggest upset in sports history, James J. Braddock met the iconic Joe Louis. This was a year after Joe Louis lost to the before mentioned Max Schmeling. getting the title shot against Braddock. And basically, in this particular fight, Braddock comes out, wins the first couple rounds, but from the third round on, Joe Louis takes control of the fight and wins this by a stoppage win to become the heavyweight champion of the world, which was his mission all along. The historical significance of this, from this point on to the end of 1949, Joe Louis was the heavyweight champion of the world, and nobody was beating him, no matter how hard they tried. 12 years, 25 successful title defenses. It was on this night in 1937 in the Long Island Bowl in New York, where Joe Louis became the heavyweight champion of the world by beating the Cinderella Man, James J. Braddock. It was after Braddock had the upset of all time when he beat Max Baer, and Louis catapulted this to probably the greatest run in heavyweight history, actually the greatest run in boxing history, and maybe even in sports history. And when you talk about unbreakable records, no one's touching Joe Louis. Plain and simple. Nobody is. Because the political aspect of the sport it is today, among many other things. But it goes to show you the drive that Joe Louis had to be great. And one of the real tidbits of this, when he beat when he beat James J. Braddock, he didn't want to accept the role of champ. He wanted Max Schmeling in that ring bad in a rematch so he can call himself champ. He basically said, I may be the champ now. Doesn't mean anything until I get Schmeling in the ring. And we know what happened June 22, 1938, which I'm going to touch on after the weekend, because that is a subject within itself. And probably the most anticipated fight maybe in boxing history. But it was 87 years ago today, based in the reign of Joe Louis began. No one's touching that record. I'm sorry. No matter how hard you try. Some people try to have some weird spin-off a few months ago over some prospect, thinking if he won it at the age of 19, could he just surpass it? No, that's not happening. Too many reasons for it. The climate of the sport today versus what it was then is too different. And that's what everyone needs to understand when it comes to championship expectations. Now we conclude probably with one of the more circumstantial and eye-browsing events that took place. This took place exactly 62 years ago in London. This was the first of two meetings between Cassius Clay and Henry Cooper. This was basically the fight for Clay to, if he won, he was going to edge closer to the title shot with the then champion Sonny Liston. He fights a tough and durable Henry Cooper. They go into London, basically for this particular fight. Clay openly predicts to Cooper's face he's going to knock him out in the 5th round. The story of this fight was basically really the end of the 4th round to the early of the 5th round, because it was that left hook by Cooper. Some people call it the biggest punch in British boxing history that floored Cassius Clay at the end of the 4th round. Looked like he was going to get a win and had the fight under control. But as he got up, it was later revealed that a glove was cut on Cassius Clay, and they had to call a massive timeout to find a replacement glove to take over the glove that was cut. A lot of conspiracy theories with this one. Some people are trying to make this weird accusation that it was Angelo Dundee, the trainer of Cassius Clay at the time, cut the glove on purpose after he got floored to try and buy him some time. That thing was debunked. All kinds of weird situations regarding this. But after the glove was repaired, Clay recovered to get the knockout win over Cooper in the 5th round, as he openly predicted. But there's still always going to be this ongoing circumstance that has all the conspiracy theorists up in arms when you talk about what happened between Cassius Clay and Henry Cooper when I talk about the cut glove. All kinds of weird conspiracies, because remember, it was the perfectly placed left hook by Cooper on Clay that floored him. Looked like Clay was going to be down and out for the count, but Clay recovers and gets up, and the round ends, and that was where miraculously the glove was cut, and they had to take an extensive timeout to replace it. Always going to be these conspiracy theories as to why it happened, how it happened, but you can't change the result. The fact is, Cassius Clay openly said he was going to stop Henry Cooper in the 5th round, and what happened in round 5? He got the win. He openly said it, and he backed it up. That's why Cassius Clay, a.k.a. Muhammad Ali, is the greatest, and it basically backed it up. Got to win over him in a rematch somewhat later. That's, of course, after the 2 fights he had with Sonny Liston. Of course, this was one of his final big fights to put himself in position for the Liston fight, February 25th, 1964. And what happened in the end? You saw what happened. He gives Liston the beating of his life, and Liston quits, and he's the heavyweight champion of the world and begins his run to the greatest. But everyone is going to have their conspiracy theories on what happened in London between Cassius Clay and Henry Cooper in regards to the cut glove. Everyone has weird theories, weird assumptions, crazy assumptions. But what are you going to do at this point over what took place 60 some odd years ago? It's over. And people are still talking about it. But it was significant enough because some people called that left hook that Clay got floored by Cooper in the hardest punch in British boxing history. And we know Britain's had this share of terrific punchers that came through this country before and after Henry Cooper, and some real darn good ones too. But some people called that the hardest punch in British boxing history when that left hook floored Clay. But what happened in the end is why Clay is the greatest. Too many people in the sport like to pull out conspiracy theories for the longest time. That's why I don't like it. That's why I stopped dealing with people in the boxing community for the longest time. But here we are, 60 some odd years later, we're talking about it. It's amazing how when we see these things, people draw their own conclusions. Of course, we didn't have any of this technology back in the 60s because people will be all over the place when it comes to something like this, because this is one of those things that has everyone always up in arms. And I conclude with one last thing because this just crossed my mind and I just read it before I came on. Now we have accusations from Deontay Wilder and his people of accusing Tyson Fury of cheating. Did I remind you, you went 0-2-1 when you should have been 0-3 versus Tyson Fury. And the reason why you were 0-2-1 against Fury was because you couldn't lace his boots. And it wasn't the fact you lost the 3 fights. It was you had to draw in the first fight, but anybody with a brain knows who won the first fight between Fury and Wilder. In fact, in your second and the third fights, you got dog walked from start to finish, and basically you got dusted up and folded up and shipped to Alabama by Tyson Fury after you ran your mouth the whole time, had some bizarre pre-fight pressers with him, and now you're going to bust out something like this? Congratulations. The world knows you're on your last legs anyway. Might as well just say something on your way out. That's how I interpret it. Nice try trying to make this weird accusation, trying to accuse Tyson Fury of cheating. The only thing you can accuse Tyson Fury of is beating your butt up and down Las Vegas in the second and third fights and basically giving you a boxing lesson in the first fight in Los Angeles. The only reason why you got a draw is because 2 judges were incoherent. Anyone with a brain who saw Fury Wilder won in Los Angeles knows Tyson Fury gave him a boxing lesson, and not the only 2 rounds that Deontay Wilder won were the rounds he floored him in. And no, that second knockdown was not a long count because Jack Dempsey is turning in his grave when you talk about it. That's what I have to say about that. Deontay Wilder still can't get over the fact he couldn't carry Tyson Fury's jockstrap in that 3-fight series. It's not the fact, it wasn't just a 3-fight series. It was a 3-fight series where Deontay Wilder only won 4 of the rounds. And if I believe it's some of the 30 to 32 rounds, and Deontay Wilder only won 4 of them. The rounds he floored Fury in. And what happened every time he floored Fury? He got up. We know what happened in the second fight. He basically fought Wilder's fight and punked him. And after a slow start to the third fight in the first 4 rounds, from the 5th round on, it was just a carbon copy of the second fight. That right hand that basically just turned Wilder sideways and put him face first on the floor, putting him to sleep. Actually, if you saw the knockdown, you know he was asleep. So whatever accusation Deontay Wilder has, he can accuse it all he wants. I mean, if you want to try to publicize a 4th fight with Fury, have at it. Because what's going to happen in the 4th fight? Guess what? He's going to beat you again. Nobody wants to see it. Actually, nobody wanted to see a 3rd fight, but because you had a $10 million guarantee and you cried to an arbitrator about it, you got it. And Fury said, okay, I'll beat him again. And that's what happened. And Deontay Wilder, whatever's left of him, if there's anything left, it's basically on borrowed time. If there's anything left. He still thinks he's going to get a fight with Anthony Joshua, which I don't know what you get out of it at this point. I mean, the only fight that makes sense for Anthony Joshua is an all-UK fight with Fury. That's about it. But Deontay Wilder, you're officially irrelevant. You can accuse Fury of whatever you want. The footage is out there. The official results are there. You couldn't cut it against Tyson Fury. You had 3 chances, and you blew it all 3 times. You were just lucky to be gifted a draw in the first fight, because anybody with a brain knows who won that first fight. Period. Say whatever you want. You're irrelevant. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I will be back tomorrow night, and I hope everyone had themselves a wonderful rest of the 19th of June, 2025. Again, if you missed any part of my show or any others, you can catch them on the Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and Spotify apps. You can also tune me on to the X platform here in a minute. I will be joined by a special bunch of terrific people, a part of the Wager Wild program, on a podcast called NFL Gridiron. I'll be doing more NFL stuff. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in life. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. If you do take care of yourself first, the good things will come your way. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves, and God bless.